X-Men 97 Season 2 is officially here, so let's just get right into it, because today we're talking X-Men 97 Season 2 premiere, breakdown, and review. But before we get into anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Alright, getting right into it, the first thing that this premiere did was give us 3 new episodes of Season 2, and I think that was probably the best decision the series could have made, especially because each episode follows a different group of the X-Men scattered throughout time. The first episode showed us the X-Men that are in the future. The second episode showed us the X-Men that are in the present. And then the third episode showed us the X-Men in the past. And that one is actually a two-parter. And in my opinion, that was probably the best episode out of the 3. So the fact that we are getting a part 2 to that storyline actually makes me really excited for next week. Some of the other things that I really liked about these episodes, obviously the animation is absolutely stellar. The animation team goes absolutely insane for this series. Everything looks so absurdly good. Getting into more specific things that I really liked, obviously last season through the medium of Morph, we got to see a couple really cool characters, and in the premiere it was no different. We got a glimpse at Thor, his first appearance in X-Men 97. It was really cool. It was pretty brief, but still really cool to see him. And I just love that Morph is just the ultimate way to give fans Easter eggs for different characters in this series. But aside from that, one of the other moments that I absolutely loved in specifically the first episode was Jean teaching Nathan about his powers, walking him through how to use them, and just overall the dynamic between Scott, Jean, and Nathan was really cool. And the fact that Scott, after talking to the person who was giving them all these different prophecies about Nathan and his destiny, decided, you know what, I really don't trust her, so we're just going to leave, takes Nathan along with Jean, and they just get out of there. And although it doesn't really work out that well, and it doesn't work out in their favor, I just really like to see Scott deciding for himself to say, hey, you know what, screw your prophecy, we don't trust you, I'm going to protect my son, and Jean being 100% supportive of that. And I feel like in some moments she was almost egging him on to do something like that as well. And I think that just adds to the fact that I really enjoy the dynamic between these 3 characters, and I really enjoy the relationships that we got to see form. Now, it does make me wonder why Cable from the future doesn't have these type of memories from past Cable, and that is why, in my opinion, time travel is always a weird thing. It always makes you wonder why certain characters, if they are indeed from the future, and we saw them pop up in previous seasons, why they don't recall events like this happening. Now, there might be some type of explanation for this. We do have to wait and see, but that is definitely a worry that I always have when it comes to time travel being a major part of a storyline. But since we are talking about Cyclops, I wanted to say that Cyclops from season 1 gave us some of the best fighting choreography that we have seen in X-Men, and season 2 definitely highlighted that once again. One of my favorite things that he does specifically in this series is using his optic blast to not only destroy enemies, but also to shift his position on the battlefield. He does this really cool thing where he'll use his optic blast and then all of a sudden slide back using the impact from that blast, and it is just so absolutely cool every time he does it. It never gets old, and I am glad that they are keeping that up in season 2. And speaking of really cool abilities and getting to see those on screen, Storm in the first episode was an absolute badass. Watching her control a cosmic power was so incredibly cool, and I know a lot of people say that Storm isn't really an Omega level mutant. However, in my opinion, she absolutely is. There are comic storylines in which she is an Omega level mutant, but also storylines in which she isn't an Omega level mutant. It's just in how she is portrayed, and this series is definitely doubling down on the fact that she 100% is an Omega level mutant, and that was definitely showcased in the first episode. And I really love that in this series specifically, they give Storm so many different moments to shine. I feel like in other series, they don't expand upon how absolutely powerful and how absurdly broken her abilities truly are, but in this series, they tend to highlight that almost every chance they get, and I absolutely love it. But my praise for the mutants and their abilities does not end there, because we also got to see Feral Wolverine, and we get to see his bone claws for the first time ever in animation, which was really awesome to see. And I know a lot of people say that he is technically stronger without the adamantium, and while I will agree with that, when they are going against robots, I feel like having the bone claws is more of a detriment than having the adamantium is. However, that is very specific to those enemies, so I'm interested to see how they portray his abilities moving forward throughout this season. And I also really like that they seem to use Wolverine in a very sparingly way. He is not the main character character of this series. The overall X-Men are all the main characters in their own right. A lot of series like to focus on Wolverine himself, especially a series like Wolverine and the X-Men, or more specifically, the movies we got from Fox. They definitely wanted to hammer home that Wolverine was the main character, and I really like that this series decides to make all of the X-Men the overall main characters of the story. I feel like it gives us way better dynamics and also gives us more interesting stories because we're not just following it from the perspective of one person. We're getting to see a lot of people's different viewpoints on different situations. But that is essentially all I have from the first episode. Moving on to episode 2, we get to see X-Force, Cable forming his team, and they actually even changed up the title sequence to match X-Force rather than it being the traditional X-Men 97 intro, which was really cool. And pretty early on, we get to see that X-Force is very different from the X-Men. And this is pointed out when Cable literally offs one of Apocalypse's 4 horsemen after he's already been captured. And Jubilee even says that's not what the X-Men do. They don't kill people. And Cable says, well, that's okay. We are not the X-Men. This is different. The X-Men are gone. And I feel like the clash between these two ideologies is something that is definitely going to progress throughout this series. And I feel like what is eventually going to happen is Cable is going to keep this mindset, and he is going to inevitably clash with the mindset of his parents. Because keep in mind, Scott and Jean, although they will tiptoe along the line, they probably won't ever end up crossing that line entirely. They are both X-Men through and through. So that's definitely something that I am looking forward to watching. We also got to see a couple other characters in episode 2. We got Emma Frost, we got Polaris, which I was really excited to see. I don't think she's been in an animated series aside from Wolverine and the X-Men, and considering she is one of my favorite X-Men characters, I was extremely excited to see her on screen once again. And although I'm not a huge fan of Jubilee, I feel like she did have one of the best one-liners in this entire premiere, and maybe even the entire series as a whole so far, and that was when she called Havoc a knockoff Cyclops. That was just really funny to me, and it actually made me laugh a little bit. The sequence of her escaping after being captured was pretty cool as well. Her using her different abilities and just showing that she isn't a kid anymore, and she is an incredibly competent X-Men at this point, was really cool to see. And again, I am trying to put my personal bias for Jubilee aside because it was a really cool scene. However, I have had a disdain for the character since I was a kid and saw the original 90s X-Men series. It's been very hard to get out of that bias, but I am trying because these were 2 very awesome scenes, and both of them were only made possible because Jubilee. So I will keep that in mind as we go forward, and maybe, just maybe, I will become a Jubilee fan, but only time will tell. But that's pretty much it as far as things I liked from episode 2. Going on to episode 3, as I mentioned, this was by far and away the best episode of the premiere, and it was so incredibly good. Seeing Magneto being a mentor figure to Apocalypse, and at that time being called En-Sabanur before he took on the mantle of Apocalypse, was just really awesome to see. And we even see Magneto and Charles arguing about the fact that Magneto is essentially trying to turn En-Sabanur into the first Charles Xavier. And the point that Magneto is making is actually incredibly valid. Once again, Magneto is making great points. He is by far and away my favorite character in this entire series. He's my favorite X-Men character, and I feel like he almost always makes incredibly reasonable decisions, and his thought process usually makes a lot of sense. And in this scenario, trying to get the first mutant to be like a Charles Xavier type figure makes a whole lot of sense. It would help to ensure more stability for mutants in the future, and it would also help to prevent Apocalypse from becoming the monster that they knew in the future. So this would essentially kill 2 birds with 1 stone. And it's not like Magneto is realistically doing anything bad in this scenario. However, another thing that I liked about this discussion between these 2 people was that Charles said he agreed with Magneto, and he said it would be good for the betterment of mutant society. However, he's also worried about changing the time stream, because keep in mind, they are in the past. So anything they do could have a great impact, whether that is good or bad, on the future. And Charles is just very weary of changing anything and disrupting that sacred timeline. And this is probably one of the few times that I actually do understand where Charles is coming from. A lot of times when he does say things to Magneto specifically, I totally am on the side of Magneto. I feel like a lot of times his arguments just make a lot more sense. However, in this scenario, it does make a lot of sense to be very cautious of possibly damaging the future, and damaging the future that they are to return to, even if it is in the hopes of trying to make a better future for yourself and better future for Earth overall, a proper coexistence between mutants and humans. The action sequences in the past were also pretty cool. Seeing En-Sabanur just go batshit crazy and take take down a bunch of those robots was really cool. And actually being able to root for him in this moment was really awesome. We traditionally see him as the enemy and see him as the big bad villain. So being on his side in this moment and wanting to see him succeed over this evil tyrant was really awesome. And then I also really liked that in the moment when he was about to kill one of the leaders of their enemy, Magneto was actually the one who stepped in and stopped Ensabanur. And he convinced Ensabanur that there's a better way. And having Magneto being the voice of reason was definitely a little bit of a twist. He's normally the person that would just off someone. However, he is showing us once again that he wants to fight for a better world. He does believe in Charles' vision. But that being said, he is still going to do things in his own way, at least to some degree, specifically trying to mentor Ensabanur in a more hands-on way rather than how Charles wants him to do it, more from a distance and focusing on just getting to the future. Magneto really wants to ensure that the future is something worth going back to. And this is something that I'm really interested to see going forward. As we saw, episode 3 did end with a to be continued, and obviously we know that Explosion didn't realistically kill any of the main characters. However, what I think it did do was kill a lot of, if not all of Ensabanur's allies in that moment. And I feel like this is going to cause Ensabanur to become the Apocalypse that we know. This is going to create a deep anger and a deep hatred within him. And more specifically, a lot of this I feel like is going to be directed towards Magneto and towards these members of the X-Men. Because if Ensabanur didn't listen to Magneto in that moment and didn't spare his enemy and just killed him on the battlefield, they would have had no way to know the location of Ensabanur and Ensabanur's allies. And that could be a very important lesson that the X-Men have to learn, that their very actions actually led to the creation of Apocalypse. Had they never been there, maybe Apocalypse would never have truly been created. But that is essentially all I have as far as positives from the premiere. I do have a couple negatives overall. My first one is just with the overall premise of this season. I really do not like time travel. It is my second least favorite type of storyline we can do in a comic book series. However, I will say X-Men normally pulls off time travel better than any other series. And I feel like anytime we do see time travel in the X-Men universe, no matter what universe it is in, I normally am very happy with how it is portrayed in that specific storyline. So only time will tell if that remains to be true, but so far I am liking how they are portraying this time travel storyline, and it is incredibly compelling. And although there do seem to be certain elements of fate that are inescapable, there is enough that is malleable in these storylines that does still make it very compelling to watch. The only other thing that I have isn't really a critique, it's just something that I don't really understand. So maybe some of you guys, if you do understand, let me know in the comments below. I don't know if I missed something from season 1 or not, but the fact that Jean is essentially acting like Nathan's mother is a little bit weird. I do get that Madeline Pryor was literally a clone from Jean Grey. However, it is still weird that she is talking as if she is kind of Nathan's mom. I know that I said that I really enjoy the dynamic, and I do genuinely enjoy those three characters when they are on screen together, but it did feel a little bit weird just because in season 1 specifically, I feel like we had a few moments where she wasn't very great in any situation when handling Nathan, specifically when Scott was incredibly depressed about having to give Nathan up. That was literally what caused her to cheat with Wolverine. And maybe this is just a little bit of my disdain for Jean in season 1 showing through, and maybe that is why I found it a little bit weird. But either way, overall, I still really enjoyed the dynamic between these three characters. I just feel like it was a little bit weird and felt a little bit out of character because of what happened in season 1. But considering one of the last interactions that she did have with Nathan Summers was when he was actually Cable and when they were saying their goodbyes, that could be why she felt this sense of familiarity and felt more motherly towards him, and maybe that is why she's acting this way in these moments. And if that's the case, I don't have that much of an issue with it. That's why I say this isn't really a critique overall with the episode. It was just something that I wasn't totally sure about. That being said, overall, I feel like this was a great premiere. I feel like we are in for another really awesome season, just like season 1, but I'm interested to hear from all of you. What did you think of the premiere? Which episode was your favorite? Let me know in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And I'll see all of you in the next video. Goodbye.